afternoon. I'm Gynii Gilliam, the President and CEO of the Coeur d'Alene Area Economic Development Corporation, also known as Jobs Plus by many of you. Thank you for being with us here today for our very first virtual annual meeting of the members. If you're new to this event, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our organization. Our board of directors is comprised of 30 of our business and community leaders. Our mission is to facilitate a healthy economy by focusing on local job growth, attracting new businesses into the area, and advancing workforce development. We are funded 70% by investors and businesses like you, and 30% by the county and the cities of Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Hayden, and Rathdrum. Together with all of you, we will continue to help create jobs and improve the living standards in our communities. Thank you again for joining us today. And now I'm going to hand our meeting over to Brad Marshall with JUB Engineering and the chairman of the board of directors.
Welcome everybody to our annual meeting. We have a great program for you today. Governor Brad Little is speaking today. Avista's chief economist, Grant Forsyth, is also speaking. This year we're highlighting moving forward with a diversified economy. You know, we are fortunate to have a strong and diversified economy, including industry, manufacturing, healthcare, education, tech, aerospace, tourism. You know, a diversified economy is critical to the success of our community. As an organization, we've made it a priority to address your needs, to help you to continue to grow your business, your organization. Before you hear more, we want to first go into a very important thank you phase of our program. So please bear with us. We have a lot of people to thank because economic development is a group effort. You know, we have a 3-person office team that relies on all these partners to successfully help businesses grow. So let's start. I'd like to take a moment to recognize our Idaho state elected officials. Thank you for being here. I'd also like to thank our county and local city elected officials for their service and being here. I'd like to recognize our board of directors. You know, we have almost 30 incredible community leaders on our board, including our vice chair, Mike Kennedy of Intermax Networks, our treasurer, Tag Jacqueline of the Riverbend and Jacqueline Land, our secretary, David Flood of Spokane Teachers Credit Union, or STCU. We have Mayor Steve Woodmeyer and Troy Tymason from the city of Coeur d'Alene. We have Mayor Ron Jacobson and Linda Wilhelm from the city of Post Falls. We have Mayor Steve Griffith and Brett Boyer from the city of Hayden. And we have Mayor Vic Holmes and Leon Deuce from the city of Rathdrum. And of course, our very own Commissioner Chris Filios from Kootenai County. We have Brad Hagedon and Clint Schroeder from the Hagedon Corporation, and Dr. Rick McLennan from the North Idaho College, and Dr. Charles Butt from the University of Idaho, Coeur d'Alene campus, and Chris Meyer from the Parkwood Business Properties, and Scott Maricus from Empire Airlines, and Danny Klocko from Kootenai Health, and Michael Wolstein from the Idaho Central Credit Union, and of course, Linda Davis from Moxie, and Olivia Metz from Ignite Coeur d'Alene, and Dr. Stephen Cook, our Coeur d'Alene School District Superintendent, and Todd Kisby from Avista Utilities, and Kara Hikala from Witherspoon and Kelly, Jessica Bowman from Express Employment Professionals, and Pam Hauser from our very own Jobs and Action Committee and Heritage Health, and Representative Paul Amador from Idaho State, and of course, Gynii Gilliam, our President and CEO. I'd like to take a second and extend a very warm thank you to our returning event sponsors. They've been there every year for us, including Boughton Construction, Jacqueline Site and the Riverbend Commerce Park, the Spokane Teachers Credit Union, the Spokane International Airport, and Advanced Benefits. I also want to extend a thank you to our other event sponsors, including the City of Hayden, the City of Rathdrum, the City of Post Falls, Express Employment Professionals, the Idaho Central Credit Union, the Murray Group, Tactical Defense Fashion, JUB Engineers, the Bank of Coeur d'Alene, the First Interstate Bank, Interstate Concrete, and of course, Kootenai Health. You know, thank you for your belief in economic development in our community. You've made an incredible difference. At this point, I'd like to hand the baton over to Tag Jacqueline, our very own treasurer of the board of directors.
Hello, everyone. We are very honored to have Governor Brad Little join us again today. Thank you so much, Governor. The people of Idaho elected Brad Little as the state's 33rd governor in November 2018. He became governor on January 7th, 2019. Brad is an Emmett native who was raised on his family's sheep and cattle ranching operation. He graduated from the University of Idaho in 1977 with a Bachelor of Science in Agribusiness and has worked in the ranching industry for his entire professional life. In 1978, Brad had the good fortune and married Teresa Solon of Weiser. Teresa and Brad are the proud parents of 2 sons who have wonderful wives, Adam and Angela, and David and Kelsey. They have 6 beautiful grandchildren, and Brad has a heart for public service. He first served in public office in 2001 when he was selected to fill a Senate vacancy. He was then elected 4 consecutive terms to the Idaho Senate. During his service as senator, Brad was elected by his Republican peers during his first full term to serve in the party leadership as Majority Caucus Chair. He then served as Idaho's 37th Lieutenant Governor starting on January 6, 2009. Brad is committed to making decisions through one lens, the lens of ensuring Idaho's children and grandchildren have the best opportunities to stay in Idaho and for the ones who have left to return. Brad has advocated his whole life for limited government. He works to ensure the lightest possible hand of government in the lives of Idaho citizens and seeks to build the public's confidence in state government. Thank you again, Governor. I will now turn the floor over to you.
Well, thanks, Tag and Brad. I do intend to, if I can, leave some time for questions. I can't recall, Ginny might remember how many of these I've done, but it's always a great privilege. I would much rather be there in person, and next year we'll do that. And, you know, kind of to set the stage, and Coeur d'Alene knows all about this, Kootenai County, you know, before COVID, the big issue for all of us was how do we deal with the challenges of growth. Unlike most of the other states, now during the pandemic, we're literally dealing for the most part with the same issue, a little different bent on it. More and more people are moving to Idaho. You know that very well. Some think too many. A footnote, I was, this spring, I was at the Kroc Center and I was helping educators give out lunches, and I joked casually about requiring people from Washington to have a visa, and the crowd went wild at that point in time, and it's still an issue with our neighbors across the border coming into Idaho, particularly at that point in time, because Delta, because of what was open in Idaho, was a lot different than what was open in Washington. But our labor force had reached and has today reached historic levels, highlighting the critical need that the state of Idaho continues to invest in both education and workforce development. The strength of our economy is directly connected to, as we all know, the health of our citizens. That's why our pandemic response and mitigation is so important. Idaho's economy is doing phenomenally well compared to almost every other state, and we hope that continues. If we can reverse the trend of our rising COVID cases, and if we all do our part, we can continue to rebound. Idaho today is the #1 state for economic momentum, and my favorite, personal income growth over the past year. We lead in financial solvency, our budget surplus, a record of over $500 million. Imagine, we have a bigger surplus today than we forecast pre-COVID. Our pension liability is one of the best, and our unemployment trust fund is was in the top 10. And I think today it may be the most solvent in the United States. Part of our success is our advances in diversifying the economy, the best way to achieve long-term sustainable strength in our economy. And of course, your area and all the good work that Jobs Plus has done over the years is a big part of that. Our state budget is sound. If we continue down this path, I will advance my priorities for increased investments in education and transportation infrastructure this coming session. We must keep pace with the growth we're experiencing, and additional investment in these critical areas is needed. I look forward to working with you because success cannot happen without strong partnerships. I want to thank the members of my Economic Rebound Committee, Tim Combreck and Bill Regan, who might be on the call today or somewhere around close. Most of the steps we've taken to support business during the pandemic grew out of recommendations from that group, including our rebound grants, where we put $75 million out to over 8,700 small businesses. We provided PPE, protective equipment, for over 4,600 small businesses to keep open. Idaho also created a unique program that leverages federal coronavirus relief funds to cover local public safety, personnel salaries, and give cities and counties the opportunity to pass on $125 million to property taxpayers. This is equal to a 10 to 20% reduction in property tax bills, which is spread over 42 municipalities. We also assured Idaho's unemployment trust fund remains solid. Idaho small businesses and employers will not see a huge tax increase next year after we injected $200 million into that fund to prevent what would have been automatic doubling of unemployment insurance taxes next year. This move encourages more hiring and business profitability. We incentivized return to work for 32,000 Idahoans within about 5,100 businesses with Idaho's return to work program. This move alone helped move Idaho into one of the best employment rates in the United States. We supported childcare businesses so that they could more safely stay open to support children in Idaho's workforce. This is something that's critical, and even after COVID, I look forward to working with you to make sure that we continue to enhance childcare opportunities for both our large employers and our small employers. Idaho directed $50 million towards more than 100 projects across Idaho that will significantly improve broadband infrastructure, equipment, and services. Mike Kennedy was all against that. Not really. Why do we do this? We did it to support student remote learning. We did it to increase work from home opportunities. We did it to improve government services, and we did it to improve telehealth, all increasing economic opportunities long term. And all of these investments will make Idaho, our citizens and businesses, more prosperous and more healthy in the years to come. We also made historic investments in K-12 public education during the pandemic to support students, families, and a strong economic rebound. Public schools are constitutionally mandated and our moral obligation. The benefits accrue to students, families, communities, and of course, the state economy. While most states face budget cuts across government, including education, Idaho is one of the only states that significantly increased funds to school, directing nearly 11% more in funding to education during the pandemic. Idaho directed $60 million to K-12 for safe reopening of schools, for personal protective equipment, for bridging the digital divide, for increased connectivity, and for COVID testing for teachers and school staff, all part of $122 million in additional support. Idaho added with some new flexibility from the federal government, we were able to add back $99 million to K-12 public schools to ensure public schools experience zero reduction in funding. In order to support our schools, the State Board of Education put in place a rule on how we count students, moving from average daily attendance, bodies and seats in essence, to enrollment count, which covers schools delivering hybrid and other online options to schools. This helps reassure schools and keeps them focused on delivering learning to all students rather than worrying about counting and funding. We will closely monitor this rule and how it affects school funding, and we'll know more in the coming weeks. Idaho also directed $50 million to our Strong Families, Strong Students initiative to parents can remain in the workforce while meeting the educational needs of their children. We emphasize the expectation early on that students need to be back in their classroom for in-person as much as possible during the pandemic. Idaho created a framework for reopening to guide local school officials in their decisions on reopening schools. Out of all 115 of our school districts in Idaho, all but a couple are open to in-person learning or a combination of both in-person and remote. Higher education received $54.5 million in federal COVID relief, 3 times more than what was cut with the 5% general fund reduction. I want to thank the business community for stepping up time and time again to inspire confidence, to engage the economy during the pandemic. The local leaders in Coeur d'Alene have been great to work with and have been supportive of business during the pandemic. Until we have a widely available vaccine for COVID-19, we will need to continue to focus our efforts on protecting our neighbors while still supporting the economy. Our COVID-19 Vaccine Advisory Committee is hard at work to advance Idaho's vaccine distribution plan. The initial supply of vaccine is expected to be limited. Although the federal government has not made the final decision yet, it is expected that vaccine likely will be offered first to healthcare workers, which we totally agree with. We're told that the states could receive an initial supply of vaccine hopefully in January. Every day, we learn more about the direct correlation between safety, being COVID resistant, and the ability to keep our kids in school and economic prosperity. Today, the leadership of your local school boards, of your public health boards, the commissioners, the mayors and city council members all have very challenging jobs. I encourage you to engage and support those leaders. Today, we're at a fork in the road. What we do in the coming weeks and months will determine whether we can continue our economic rebound, protect lives, and keep our kids in school. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Governor. I appreciate your shout out about broadband, and I can tell you,
you were all against that.
I was not against that. It's for the kids, Governor. I can tell you that working with Kootenai County and Boundary County commissioners have been exceptional, and as on behalf of the EDC board, Tom Keeley and his staff of commerce have been exceptional throughout this process. So keep going. These shouldn't be too difficult for you, but some of them come with some political tentacles. So these are questions that have been submitted by our board members and our attendees and members, and some of them are coming in live real time. So I'll start with one from a municipal partner here, Governor. Many cities struggle with costs to keep up with infrastructure needs. As a method to boost the economy and help Idaho communities, would you support using half of this past year's surplus on grants for infrastructure for cities and counties?
Well, I agree, and I think everybody that knows me, either in this job or my previous job, how I have advocated for infrastructure investments. I talked about it in my little talk, and we'll obviously talk about it going forward. We are being somewhat careful about what we do with the current surplus because it could vaporize, but there will be some of either the surplus money or some of the CARES money that will go into that effort. But I want the people on the call and everybody to know that is one-time money. I want to see, and I've already talked to legislative leadership about it, I want to see a solid plan for ongoing investment to resolve some of these critical needs. So yes, we'll put, I can't tell you how much because we don't know what the landscape's going to be. We're going to put some of that money into infrastructure, but I also want to do a long-term, kind of a big, bold plan for both our state highways and also for local government. So the answer is yes, with a bit of a caveat.
Thank you, sir. I do want to let our attendees know if you'd like to go into the control panel, you can file some questions in there and they'll come to us and we'll sort through them. I do have it's not a question, but a statement, Governor, from Mark Tucker, one of our members in the United Way. Thank you, Governor Little, for supporting childcare in Idaho. So that's a rare that you get kudos in these days, but
I know, but while we're on that, I have been talking to business leaders and legislators all over the state. As the world continues to be competitive, I believe offering quality childcare as some kind of a benefit, particularly close to work, is going to be fundamental to more young people going into the workforce and for Idaho being competitive with other states. So with what we've done is a start, but we got more to do. I would like to see that be much broader available. Small businesses can get together and support a local daycare, and of course, large businesses, as they do often, can provide their own.
Thank you. Another question related to the CARES Act came in. Will you be able, or will the state be able to appropriate any additional CARES funding to local governments or small businesses in 2021 after December 30th of this year?
You got the wrong guy. You got to talk to Congress and the Treasury Secretary. But right now we're living by the letter of the law. And I haven't seen the numbers in the last week, but like 2 or 3 weeks ago, the maximum, we allocated 74 million to all the local government. I think the maximum drawdown from any of the local government was like 30%. So but that money, as you point out, has to be spent, it has to be COVID related, and it has to be spent before December 31st.
Here's a softball for you regarding public health, and it comes from a lawyer, so get ready. Would you agree to a review of the Public Health Board makeup in the state, given that among the many lessons of this pandemic is the fact that politics and public health don't always mix well?
I got that, Mike. I got that question. I don't know, there was Twin Falls or Pocatello, one of the other forums that I did. And what I stated there was, I'm always up for a review, but public health goes back in Idaho to 1918. We had the Spanish flu. At that point in time, when it was originally set up, every county had their own health person. And obviously Kootenai County wouldn't have any problem, but Shoshone and Benoit and Lewis County, some of the smaller counties, to have a professional staff, it was somewhat problematic. So 50 years ago, the legislature put together the current health districts we have so that we could aggregate counties in an area together to have a professional staff to look holistically at our healthcare problems. I don't have any problem with looking at it, but somebody's got to do that. I don't know that your mayors that are on the call or the county commissioners, up until March this year, February and March of this year, if you didn't have the skills to be prepared, even as unprepared as we were way better off because the expertise that resides in those health districts. And for contact tracing, health districts have done contact tracing forever. They've done the tracing. Of course, they do the food quality. So somebody has to do it, but I don't have any problem with looking at, how they're, it's 50 years old. All that legislation could use a good look back, but what are you going to replace it with?
Right. Thank you, sir. Another question. There's a lot of CARES Act and COVID questions. We'll wade through them and try to find them to not be duplicative. But in the Stephen Cook, our the superintendent of the Coeur d'Alene School District asks, first says, Governor Little, thank you for passing through the CRF funds to the school districts. Is there any chance that the timeline on spending those funds can be extended beyond December 31st? Does that need federal involvement, or is that a state decision?
It needs federal involvement, but and he's probably more familiar with the guidance. But in essence, if I were he, I would basically look at all the other things you got in your operational or discretionary funding and try and save that and use the CARES dollars between now, because the guidance from Treasury on using CARES dollars related to education is pretty broad. It's just got that hard timeline on it. It's a bit of a accounting issue, but as I talk to the delegation, and it appears that when Congress goes back in session, there's going to be CARES 2.0 or 3.0. Those timelines could go out. And Mike, because of the field you're in, some of these broadband projects, we've had to spend a little more than we wanted to because the narrow time we got to spend that money. We had a little more time, we could more effectively use it. That might happen, but right now, all I can tell you is we got to comply with federal law.
Good. Thank you, Governor. Another question from one of our board. The biggest question mark for all North Idaho employers is qualified workforce labor. Even through the close down periods of the pandemic, some employers struggled to find workers. Many North Idaho employees commute to Washington, where the minimum wage will raise to $13.69 in January, and they are entitled to multiple paid leaves, including family and paid Family Medical Leave Act. Should we simply rely on Idaho employers to pay market wages and offer benefits somehow to match, or should Idaho be looking at raising its minimum wage to better position itself on the border states that are dramatically different?
Well, generally, that a one-size-fits-all minimum wage is problematic because, now cost of living and housing in Coeur d'Alene has obviously gone up. But, you get to rural Shoshone County and Boundary County and some of those other areas, what you need to live on in those areas is way different than if you're got a lakeside home at Coeur d'Alene or you live in Sun Valley. So that's why I've always had an issue with it. And I never thought of it as a minimum wage. I always thought of it as starting wage. And what's really important is that we get people into the workforce. The Workforce Development Council, we're working on an apprenticeship program. We're trying to do everything we can to get people into the workforce. That's why we did the back to work bonuses, is because, statistically in human nature, the longer you're out of the workforce, the harder it is to get back in there. I want the economy itself to propel higher benefits, and that's why I was advocating for childcare, that it's the right thing to do to be competitive, and I believe it will be. We'll probably lag a little bit, but the people that are in Post Falls, Raft, from Coeur d'Alene know because of their proximity to Washington what it's done to the labor market.
Good information. Thank you, sir. Question on higher ed. We have time for about two more depending. Given the importance of higher ed and providing future workforce skills training, is it prudent to make this year's budget cuts to higher education permanent, or what's your view of that going forward?
Oh, they were never permanent. There was a permanent one, but it was over a year ago. It was last September, as we were trying to balance our cash flow coming in because the tax bill 2 years ago, but all the rest of them have been temporary. So none of them are permanent. And as I stated in my talk, the COVID dollars that went out through CARES Act was 3 times what the cut was. But I've told my friends in higher education that we're still looking at some other things we can do next year going forward, whether it be in the career technical side or our traditional higher ed. But that's obviously, if we keep our revenue numbers the way they are, the opportunity for expansion there is going to go up.
Thank you. As the parent of 7, I support that entirely, even though it wasn't my question. Question about in-home caregiving. This is a unique question that came through. Will there be any adjustments statewide that will allow in-home caregiving companies to provide more livable wages?
Well, it kind of depends upon how they're getting compensated now. If they're Medicaid dollars or Medicare dollars, that's a federal issue. That's CMS that makes that determination. We continue to look at it, but if if they're being compensated through federal Medicare or Medicaid, and we continue to work on those issues to make them more fair and to have the incentives for people to be in their home instead of in any kind of a facility. And it's even more important now, given the risk that you have in a long-term care facility versus the much less risk of being at home.
I just checked our time. We have time for one more, and a really good question came in from Michael Woolston of Idaho Central Credit Union, one of our board members. Governor Little, from your perspective, what can this assembled group of North Idaho leaders do to help you and the state of Idaho the most in the next period of time through this pandemic?
Well, continuing the economic advancement, but and that was an earnest plea to get involved with the city council, the county commissioner, the health districts, and the school boards in these very challenging times. We've got open meeting laws in Idaho, and open meeting laws create an opportunity for small groups of people to really raise hell with a governing body. And the problem is so many people think they're doing a great job, but they don't show up at the meeting. Showing up at the meeting and telling them you support it and being there is the right thing to do. We all know this, it's human nature that we don't go to a meeting until we're really irritated about something. But that means if you're been given one of these responsibilities and and any of those have to abide by our public meeting laws, that means that they're going to be under scrutiny. What they need are people to say, we may not 100% agree with you, but we're supportive of the sacrifice you're making to lead in those areas.
Well, certainly we appreciate that, Governor. There are probably 10 more questions that have come in. I'm going to forward those through to Mackenzie and make sure that your office gets them and you can respond as you normally would. We don't have a good mechanism for applause or appreciation to you for being here, but you've been generous with your time, and I know from that mask around your neck that you're going back out to other meetings to deal with what's happening. So thank you for being here on behalf of the Jobs Plus board, the Economic Development Board, and our region.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Bye, everybody.
Appreciate it. All right, thank you again to the governor, and I now have the privilege of turning this section of the meeting. By the way, for those folks who asked questions, thank you. I tried to choose a representative sampling from different segments of the community that had concerns, and we will forward these questions to the governor. Except for those of you who wanted to be anonymous, we won't forward those, but we'd encourage you, well, we could send it anonymously, I guess. This is a tough time for making sure we get everything right. I'm here to now ask David Flood to turn on your camera. David is the secretary of the board of directors of the Coeur d'Alene Economic Development Council, and he's also representing us from Spokane Teachers Credit Union. And David will introduce our keynote speaker. David, take it away.
Thank you, Mike. And now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Grant Forsyth. Dr. Forsyth is the chief economist of Avista Corp. Before coming to Avista in 2012, he was professor of economics at Eastern Washington University from 1999 to 2012, and where I had the privilege to be one of his students. Before Eastern Washington University, from 1996 to 1999, he worked in the Czech Republic as an academic and private sector economist. He received his bachelor's in economics from Central Washington University in 1988, his MBA in finance from the University of Oregon in 1990, and his PhD in economics from Washington State University in 1996. He also serves on the Washington Governor's Council of Economic Advisors, the Idaho Department of Financial Management's Forecast Council, the Citizen Commission for the Performance Measurement of Tax Preferences, and the Spokane Mayor's Economic Advisory Roundtable. Please help me welcome Mr. Grant Forsyth.
So with that, what I want to do today is just give about a quick 15-minute presentation looking at the US and regional labor markets in the wake of COVID-19. And it's really a big picture outlook of what's been happening in the labor market. The first thing I just want to talk about magnitude. And the idea here is we're looking at the total level of non-farm employment since 1990, so going back 30 years, for the combined Spokane-Kootenai metropolitan area. Right? And what this highlights is the initial hit that we had from COVID was shockingly large and nearly universal across the US. And so as of April 2020, we had essentially in the region a 16% decline in employment due to the COVID shutdowns, which put us at a level of employment that we saw a decade ago. So the real unanswered question going forward is, what is employment growth going to look like? Over this whole period that you see here, our average annual employment growth in the region was about 2%. And my feeling is, in order to get back to that, ultimately, we're going to need a vaccine to get the economy back to a kind of normal rhythm, to get back to that normal long-term growth rate of 2% a year. If we focus a bit more regionally and more into the current time frame, one of the issues we're going to have to deal with is the employment recovery, and we've had some employment recovery since April, which was the low point, right? That employment recovery is actually starting to slow. And so what this graph is showing you is seasonally adjusted, so I'm taking out seasonal fluctuations. It's the seasonally adjusted employment recovery since February 2020, which was that last normal month before the COVID shock. And what I've done here is I've indexed the employment level in February for the Kootenai metro area, the Spokane metro area, and the US to all future employment levels going out to September 2020, which is the last month I've got, right? And what you can see there in April is that big hit that we saw clear across the country. Kootenai was down 13%, right? If you look at Spokane, we were down even more, 17%. And then what we saw was a pretty good recovery up through June. Okay? But what's happened since June is that employment recovery, really starting in July, has slowed considerably. And so right now, we're still about 5% below normal in Kootenai, and we're still 8% below in Spokane. But as the governor pointed out, the good news for Idaho is that your recovery has been a bit stronger, right? So you're down much less than what we're seeing on the Washington side. But the reality is, for both the Idaho side and for the Washington side and for the US, that recovery has slowed. And that's a bit concerning. Now, tomorrow we're going to get US data on non-farm employment, and that'll give us some indication of whether or not that employment is still slowing. But unfortunately, the company ADP, which is a payroll company, they have their own measure that comes out before the official US measure of employment. That came out this week, and ADP is signaling that employment growth has continued to slow going into October. So that's just something we need to be aware of as we monitor the recovery. Now, if we again focus a little bit more just on sectors, you know, the big hit really occurred to leisure and hospitality, and you know, that's going to be the same clear across the US. And so here again, we're looking at Kootenai metro area, the Spokane metro area is in red, and you can see leisure and hospitality as a sector took by far the biggest hit, and they're still down the most compared to the same time last year. The next sector that took a pretty big hit was mining, logging, and construction, MLC. Virtually all of that is construction. Okay? But the good news is I follow permitting weekly, and one of the things I'm starting to observe in the region is that permitting for residential housing has really held up very well through the COVID crisis. And so my expectation is, as we go into the new year, the construction activity will pick up, and we'll begin to see that big decline of 12 and 11% start to shrink. It's been really kind of interesting to see what's happening in Idaho. You have had a pretty strong year in terms of permitting for single family houses, and we're starting to see this year a pretty big surge in permitting for apartment units. And so again, I think that bodes well for construction activity at least going into 2021. If we look at the other sectors here, the other sectors I'm really kind of worried about are a little bit some of the service sectors that again would really benefit from a vaccine, which goes along with leisure and hospitality. On the government side, you can see it looks a little bit worse on the Washington side, and that's because we've been slower to open our schools. The higher ed institutions are also been slow to reopen. And so as a result, in terms of public education, which is in government, private education, which is in education and health services, it's definitely weaker on the Washington side. And again, ultimately for leisure and hospitality, a lot of services and education and health services, and to get back to normal, we really need to see kind of a vaccine that's put in place so that we can begin engaging in those activities that require us to gather together. Now, I thought it might be useful too to also look at some of the new research that's coming out. Okay, in other words, I thought it might be fun being subjective, but if you're an economist, this is what we do for fun. This is a study that came out just recently from the National Bureau of Economic Research, the NBER. And the NBER is a highly respected, nonpartisan economic research center. They're more famously known for the organization that dates our expansions and contractions, but they do a lot of high quality research. And what this shows is, looking at how did employment change based on firm size and the level of pay. And what it shows is in the initial hit from the COVID shutdown, it was smaller firms, 1 to 49 employees, that took the biggest initial hit. But it appears that most firms, regardless of size, seem to be recovering in a similar way. The more troubling thing in terms of the labor market is that next graph on the right, which shows that really the labor sector that took the biggest hit were the low-paid workers, the lowest paid workers in the lowest quintile of pay. And that's that kind of deeper blue line that you see towards the bottom. Okay. One of the things to be aware of is low pay is often associated with skill level. And so one of the things that we need to pay attention as we go into the recovery is how are those lower paid, lower skilled workers recovering, because they've taken the biggest hit. And I think one of the things that economists are worried about going forward for that particular category of worker is going to be underemployment. And so we're focusing pretty heavily on the unemployment rate, but that can come down even though people who want to work full-time can only find part-time work. That's the underemployment component. So one of the things that I think we should be concerned about regionally is the underemployment going forward, especially of those lower paid workers, because they've taken the biggest hit. Okay. Another NBER paper, and I think this is important to look at because the CARES Act came up in the governor's discussion. And so what they've done is they've gone out and looked at how, through a household survey of 12,000 households, how have individuals who received those one-time CARES payments, how did they spend that money? And how did it affect their labor search once they were removed from work because of the COVID shock? So in the first case, how was the money used? Well, it turns out households were pretty judicious in how they used that CARES money. About 40% of it was for non-debt spending, and most of that was on non-durable goods. So it wasn't like people went out and bought new cars and motorcycles and this kind of thing. Most of it was what I would consider as basic household spending. About 30% of those care payments were used to pay down debt, which I think is highly useful because it minimizes the likelihood we get into a debt repayment crisis in the US. And astonishingly, about 30% of their CARES money was saved. That also bodes well because it gives households a little bit more flexibility moving forward as we deal with the COVID crisis and until Congress can act again on a second CARES-related kind of program. In terms of labor supply, a lot of people were concerned that these new programs, in particular the CARES payments, might cause people to stop looking for work. And that is not what the household survey showed. Their research indicates that it actually had no meaningful impact on people's search for work. And I think that's because most people realize this is one-time money or temporary money. So it appears that the labor market impacts are not very strong or negative. in terms of people's willingness and desire to work again in a normal way. So what are the takeaways? Okay. The good news is Idaho has recovered more jobs than Washington has, but the recovery has slowed in both regions, and that's going to be a problem. I, like a lot of economists, think that really what we need to get back to more robust growth is a second stimulus, okay, and a vaccine. Otherwise, future growth is going to continue to be fairly muted because I think people are going to choose on their own to be fairly risk averse in response to the virus. Okay, for a robust employment recovery, we really need to see private services recover since it accounts for 70% of employment in our region. And again, I don't really see the service sector fully recovering until we've got the COVID-19 under control. And again, that's probably going to require a vaccine. Some concerns about an uneven recovery for workers based on pay, which is a proxy for skill level. Okay, and we need to be really mindful in the region as we see the unemployment rate goes down. We need to also be looking out for underemployment, which the official unemployment rate isn't necessarily going to capture. Finally, there's evidence to suggest that workers have built up savings via the CARES program. This will provide a buffer, at least for a while, but that's why it's important for Congress to revisit this issue as soon as possible. And so with that, I'm willing to take some questions. I will say that I did get a couple questions early, and let me just briefly respond to those before the other questions come in. So one question I got is infrastructure demand. What does that look like for the region? Well, you know, if you look at permitting, again, which I follow pretty much every week, especially the Idaho side from the Rathdrum Prairie all the way down to Post Falls, it appears it's going to continue to grow quite rapidly. My guess is there's going to be a tremendous demand on infrastructure. And so one of the problems we're going to have in the region is keeping that infrastructure up to pace with the amount of growth that we've got in terms of housing to keep people moving around in an efficient way. So I think that's going to continue to be a struggle. The other question I got was a prediction for 2021, especially the first quarter. I think if we can get a vaccine early and get that vaccine distributed, that's going to have a big impact on what the first quarter looks like. So no vaccine, no second stimulus, I think growth will continue to be fairly muted. If we can get the stimulus and the vaccine, I think you're going to see growth pick up pretty dramatically, and we could potentially get back to where we were pre-COVID recession pretty quickly. But it really depends on what happens, I think, with the vaccine situation and also whether or not we get a second stimulus. That's going to have a big impact on what that first quarter looks like. And the one question directly related to Avista happens to be about our new LED streetlights. And the question is, are we working to replace those? And in fact, we've been working on that for now, I want to say at least 3 or 4 years. And in fact, a lot of those streetlights have been replaced. And it's amazing how much less energy they use. So with that, I'll go ahead and throw it up to any other questions that might be coming in. Okay, so one of the questions is, with the rise in cases, and I'm assuming that means COVID cases, where do you see the employment in Kootenai County heading? What area do you see being affected the most? Again, I think the areas that are going to be most affected by that are any kind of business activities that would normally require people to be grouped together. And so you've got leisure and hospitality, you've got certain kinds of services where you need a lot of personal interaction. As long as you have an increase in cases, that's going to continue to mute the economic activity in those areas, because I think a lot of people are simply going to choose not to participate in those activities as much as they ordinarily would. So again, it's the service sector, and again, the service sector where you have a lot of close contact normally. And again, that includes leisure and hospitality. And remember, in our region, even in Spokane, leisure and hospitality is a huge employer. And again, for them to get back to normal, we really need to have that vaccine in place. Okay, it says Any plans to expand? Well, that's a good question. So the question is, says crush the curve Idaho. Southern Idaho has done a great job on setting up structured processes for testing COVID. Is there any plans to expand that in North Idaho with the rise in cases? You know, that's a good question, and I don't know how to answer that in an educated way, because I'm not exactly sure what the health districts and the health sector in Kootenai is on this particular issue.
Grant, that just as Mike Kennedy, that was actually intended for the governor as one of the several questions we didn't have time to get to, but thank you for answering that. And for anyone else on the call, I don't see any new questions for Grant. Are there any that have come in via email, Lauren, or?
None.
Okay. We should get Brad Marshall back then, I think. Grant, there's Brad.
There's Brad. Thanks, Grant. Certainly appreciate you being our keynote speaker this year and your in-depth and comprehensive presentation. Certainly an interesting and challenging time to be an economist in our country and our region.
I'm bald for a reason.
Yeah, and on my end, I think I've gained some weight for a reason. Nonetheless, again, if any additional questions do come in after today's meeting, we'll forward them to you, and hopefully we can get some responses back, similar to what we did with the governor.
I'm happy to respond to anybody who might have additional questions. Happy to give anybody the presentation if they'd like it.
Oh, great. We may well just take you up on that. With that, we'll let you go. And again, thank you so much. We're now going to transition to our business part of our annual meeting. I'm going to turn the reins over to Tag Jacqueline to take it from there.
Hey, thanks, Brad, and Grant. Thanks again for a really insightful presentation. That was great. So I'd now like to take a moment to introduce everyone to our two newest board members. First of all, we have Clint Schroeder, regional publisher, North Idaho newspapers, and Hagedorn Media Group. Clint is an accomplished executive with domestic and international leadership experience in corporate operations, fund development, P&L oversight, multi-channel product distribution, communications, branding, both startup growth organizations. Clint has a strong track record of community involvement, served as an executive leadership for Hawaii's District 5000 Rotary from 2012 to 2018, and served as district governor for 2016-17 fiscal year. Our next new board member is Kara Hikla, principal of Witherspoon Kelly. Kara is an Idaho native and received her undergraduate degree from Idaho State University in Healthcare Administration. Kara received her JD cum laude from Seattle University of Law in 1997, after which she spent 10 years in private practice in Washington. Kara moved home to Idaho in 2008 and now focuses her regional practice on defending employers in state and federal courts and in various administrative settings. So once again, thank you, Clint, or welcome Clint and Kara to the board, and thank you for your sincere engagement and for the work that you both have done and continue to do to help our region thrive. The only other thing I'd like to note, there was a change this year at the executive committee level, and that is that I have joined that committee as the treasurer of the board. And I think that takes care of that business. So now I'll hand it back over to you, Brad.
Okay. Thanks, Tag. I too would like to thank our board of director, Chris Meyer, for his unfaltering service as our treasurer over the last couple of years. Chris has done a tremendous job managing, handling our finances, and I thought that Tag had some big shoes to fill, and that Tag too has done a tremendous job as well. So we're lucky to have some great people running our finances. With that said, I'd like to introduce our President and CEO, Gynii Gilliam, who's going to give an overview of Jobs Plus.
Well, hello again, everybody. We're happy to present the annual report for 2019 and some update for the current year, 2020. If you'll give us a second, we'll get the slides up for you. Okay, so here we go. At the start of the program, I mentioned that we do briefly. Here's a little more. Essentially, we help build a healthy economy by strengthening the base, diversifying the economy, supporting the creation of new jobs, and advancing workforce development. We do all this in cooperation with our business and industry leaders and all levels of government. This commitment to partnership and collaboration is embedded in everything we do. We are more than the three of us in the office. Our organization is the sum of the strength of the board of directors, partners, and our investor. This slide only shows a handful of the strength. The list of investors and businesses in the program we sent you and also attached to this meeting is a better reflection of who we are. The why is for the success of our region and our citizens. New or expanding businesses, creating new jobs with better wages and opportunities, generate tax dollars for schools, roads, fire, police, and other services. This year, what we do is even more important as we navigate the challenges presented by this global pandemic and as we work our way towards recovery and success. Our focus remains the same, diversifying our economy and our industry strengths, which are manufacturing, warehousing, professional services, tourism and recreation, as well as health services and information technology. Okay, next slide. I'm going to go back to 2019 for a moment. I know it feels like eons ago, but really it was just last year. As always, we worked with well over 24 companies, with 5 of the projects coming to fruition. These 5 companies created or will be creating a total of 120 new direct jobs, brought in $25 million to our county, and added another $5 million to our community's annual payroll. Stancraft completed the construction of the FBO at the airport. Dauntless Air was no doubt busy fighting fires, with York Saw and Knife and 3 Ops Tactical not severely affected by the pandemic. In our current year, this wild and crazy 2020, we also have good news. We have 30 new projects just since April. When the pandemic first hit, we actually thought everything would come to a standstill. As it turns out, a month afterwards, the gates opened wide. CEOs, site selectors, and commercial realtors are calling our office, mostly from coastal cities, looking at relocation and expansion opportunities for businesses. Of this group, 5 have applied for our state's TRI incentive or a local incentive, which generally means more seriousness of purpose. And we made the top 5 cut on a couple of large projects. Unfortunately, we probably won't hear final decisions until well into January 21, with companies waiting for election results, just like all of us. On behalf of the treasurer of the board, I'm happy to report that our organization is in sound financial position, albeit down in income this year. Our treasurer, Tag Jacqueline, and our board of directors take their fiscal responsibility seriously, and as per Magnuson and McHugh's recommendations, we have several double and triple check systems in place. For 2019, budgeted income was $439,000, $40,000 above 2018, with actual income coming in at $410,000. Budgeted expense was $439,000, with actual expense coming in at $400,000. For this year, 2020, we again set our budget at $439,000. We were certain we would hit that goal, but of course the pandemic hit, and understandably, there were reductions in investment from our investors. Without the $57,000 PPP that we received, we would have been down almost $100,000 from our budget projections. We reduced expenses to match income, which, thank goodness, was easy enough to do with limited travel for both us and our clients. And last but not least, we have a healthy reserve of at least 75% of our normal operating budget. We're keeping things lean to extend our reserves reach in anticipation of potentially tougher coming years. Looking forward, we have big challenges. We've all had to pivot and adapt, and there's always the possibility of stalled growth. For our biggest challenge, it's addressing COVID-19's multiple impacts to our region, from immediate to long-term student needs, from food to broadband, to business and general population needs. I don't have enough time to list them all, but we are working with the cities, the county, community organizations, our many partners to help address them. In the meantime, previous challenges, including social and economic justice, available sites, talent needs, and housing issues have not gone away and continue to be in the forefront of what we need to address. Like all of you, we pivoted and adapted quickly, working from home while Zooming with our clients and each other. Although most of our work can be done remotely, we reopened our office at the end of June. We also changed our focus the first 2 months, making helping our existing businesses the very top priority. We coordinated with our partners to provide resources as quickly as possible, whether it's about the congressional stimulus or other resources. Since then, we're rebalancing our focus between helping existing businesses and addressing the needs of those interested in relocating or expanding in our region. One of the newest ways we're adapting to reduce site visits is to create a series of virtual site videos. We have a teaser video for you at the end of the program. It's still a draft, but you'll get a feel for what we want to accomplish with Travis Bertram from Pulse Productions, who's also helping us with this event. The other possibility we may face is stalled growth. Everything looks good right now, but like Grant mentioned, although we've recovered some of the losses from March and April, growth is slowing down. We were one of the fastest growing metros in the fastest growing state, and we're confident we can regain that status. As the governor mentioned, our economic stability is a big plus. In the meantime, however, we need to brace for the possibility of a slower recovery. Although we're facing these challenges as we look to the future, let's not forget that big challenges give us transformational opportunities. As we did in 1987, when we moved from strictly ag, timber, and mining community towards a more diversified economy with a focus on growing manufacturing, tourism, and recreation. Now, thanks to the CdA Resort and everyone in the hospitality industry, we're a world-class tourist hotspot. Moreover, thanks to the founding fathers of this organization and the work of previous boards and all of my predecessors, we have a healthy manufacturing sector and related industry sectors. Most recently, we have the beginnings of another transformational industry. Expansion at Kootenai Health spurred establishment of the Health Urban Renewal District to further encourage and cluster growth around our community hospital. Along with expansions at Northwest Specialty Hospital in Post Falls and rapid growth at Heritage Health and Ernst Health, this industry can be another transformational opportunity for our region. However, on a more down-to-earth, we need tomorrow perspective, we're also working with our partners to help as many businesses as we can, whether it's information for forgivable loans, webinars from SBDC, loans from PAC, access to equipment from NIC Ventures, or learning to write apps through Inspire ID with the University of Idaho. We're working together to help keep your businesses open, keep your employees employed, and perhaps to help find jobs through Idaho Labor or any of our private employment agencies. At our board meeting, we're also constantly checking in on our anchor institutions, our cities, county, schools, colleges, and hospitals, to see what they need and to see what we can do. Speaking of this, I'm going to do a plug for the school district. They need substitute teachers and bus drivers. So if you're so inclined, please feel free to contact any of our school districts. As to our vision for the future, it's of course a given that we all want to surface from the challenges of 2020. Perhaps run away from 2020 would be more appropriate. Through the rest of the year and beyond, we will continue to work towards increasing economic activity and diversity, especially through entrepreneurial support and the creation of a gig economy. We'll continue to encourage more advanced educational opportunities, targeting jobs for the future, and developing creative talent development, retention, and recruitment programs. We'll also continue to help with forward-thinking planning in our region. And for that, all 4 cities, the county, the hospital, several other organizations are working on comprehensive and future planning. Through our Idaho Cares funding, we may be able to complete last mile broadband to some of our more rural communities. Thank you, Intermax. Broadband, by the way, is not a luxury. It's a lifeline for education, for work, and for everything we do. Other critical projects are the ones that address our current and projected transportation needs through a local options tax. And although we were not successful in passing the tax, it's a step in the right direction to address our needs before they become very critical. So I always give you all a call to action at the end of the annual report, and this one will be no different. Please wear a mask. It's to help prevent our health system from being overrun, to keep our businesses open, and to keep our loved ones safe. So please wear a mask. Be engaged, as most of you already are. Be aware of business and industry needs, and please let us know if you hear of something. We can't help if we don't know what the issue is. We have multiple challenges in front of us. The pandemic, elections, social unrest, just to name a few. But there's also a bunch of good, some even transformational things ahead of us. And this region has a very rich history of coming together, overcoming hurdles, and reaching a vision. So I want to remind you all that we got this, okay? And if you were all in the same room with me, I would make you repeat, we got this, because we do. We got this. Thank you. This concludes our annual report. Now I'll hand the meeting over to Mike Kennedy, the Vice Chairman of the Board of Directors. In his day job, he is the President of Intermax Networks, a tech company providing internet bandwidth, telephone, and voice services to North Idaho and Eastern Washington. Mike will close our program, and at the end, we will share our teaser video. Mike, please take it away.
Thank you, Ginny, and I appreciate all of your work. I should say on behalf of the board, the staff has had many, many different and crazy experiences this year, but you've hung in there, and we have had an increase, as you said, of people wanting more information, and keeping up on that is a big work. So good for all of you. Thank you all for joining us. This is our first virtual annual meeting. We're almost near the end. I just want to say a few things for the last few minutes. For those of you that are new to this annual meeting, we hope to see you next year in person. We have done this meeting for the many years that the Economic Development Agency has been in existence. If you are not an investor or a contributor, and that number ranges from many, many tens of thousands from some of our members down to individual memberships at $100, every one of those is important. I'd ask you to contact Lauren Witten-Kaboth, she's our investor relations liaison. And any of us on the board, also the names of whom you heard today, can steer you in the right direction should you seek to be part of the solution and part of the project to help us continue our economic development. We do need your help, and the goal of moving forward with our diversified economy consists. We're a great group, and we gladly welcome you all to be part of it. One more moment. I want to thank again our event sponsors today: Riverbend Commerce Park, Jacqueline Site and Jacqueline Family, STCU, Advanced Benefits, Boughton Construction, and the Spokane International Airport. Thank you to our guests, our elected officials, our investors, our partners, and all of our board of directors. Travis with Pulse Productions, you did a wonderful job dealing with very tech clueless people that you had as your clients here. Appreciate your pulling it together and your wonderful creativity. Lauren and Josh from the office team, you guys made this work, and this has gone as smoothly as we could have hoped, and we really appreciate it. So with that, I will ask Travis to start our video, and then our meeting will be adjourned, and I wish you all a great week and a great month, and appreciate you being here.
Hello, I'm Gynii Gilliam, the President and CEO of the Coeur d'Alene Area Economic Development Corporation. Thank you for your business interest in North Idaho. We are here to help you from site selection to meeting with government officials and business leaders to investigating incentives to meeting with the chambers for your ribbon cutting. We are your one-stop shop for all of your business relocation and expansion needs in North Idaho. Our aim is to help you through the process quickly so you can open your doors and make your time to market goals. Welcome to our communities. We serve all of Kootenai County, from the rural communities to the 4 largest cities of Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Hayden, and Rathdrum. Our mission is to build a healthy economy by strengthening the base, diversifying the economy, supporting the creation of new jobs, and advancing workforce development, all in cooperation with business and industry leaders and all levels of government in order to facilitate business retention, expansion, and attraction.